Well, here we are, January 1st, 2020. It's a new year, and we've also kicked off a new season of Doctor Who. Last season, for the most part, not pleased with last season. I did not like the direction that Chris Chibnall took Doctor Who. I did not like Jodie Whittaker's portrayal of the Doctor, and in particular, I did not like the production style. With that said, I've just finished watching Spyfall Part 1, the premiere episode for Series 12, and I'm sure you guys are eagerly awaiting to hear my thoughts on it. So that's what this video is going to be. I've jotted down several notes, and I'm now going to express my opinions on this opening episode for Series 12. I've got a long list of things here that I did not like about this episode, and I know a lot of you are probably right off the bat are going to say that I just can't be pleased, and that's just not true. If these things were corrected or addressed, it would make the viewing experience better, and I would be more inclined to like the episode of Doctor Who. Of course, it doesn't help that for the last few weeks I've been kind of revisiting the original series stories, particular some Hartnell stories. So I've kind of got the classic Doctor Who formula fresh on my mind. So I'm kind of like, as always, I'm comparing the modern series to the production style of the original series, and they're so fundamentally different that it's oftentimes when I'm watching the new series of Doctor Who, it just doesn't even feel like Doctor Who to me. Okay, the first little thing. This is just me kind of nitpicking. It's not a big deal. They only mention it once, but it's to me it's just beating a dead horse, and I don't know why they're still doing this. Near the beginning of the episode, Stephen Fry's character, he makes some remark about how he had read all the files and he knew that the Doctor was a man. My problem with this little scene is that in response to Stephen Fry's comment, the Doctor says that she's had an upgrade. Look, maybe I'm just reading too deep into this, but it implies that you're you're implying that the transition from a male to a female is somehow, when you describe that as an upgrade, you're elevating female above male, because an upgrade by definition is an improvement. I guess what I'm saying is you have to be careful with your dialogue, and because these are special circumstances. Okay, we're still fresh off of the Jodie Whittaker is the first female Doctor thing, and when you write dialogue like this, where you describe the Whittaker regeneration as an upgrade, again, you're kind of implying that the female Doctor is superior somehow to the male incarnations, and again, maybe I'm just reading in too deep into that, but that's how it came across to me. And you can call me sexist or whatever, or misogynist, or an old fart, or whatever you want for me interpreting it that way. I don't care. That's just how it came across to me. And again, we I thought we had addressed this the Doctor is a female thing last season. Why are we still having to go through this? Everybody knows that. Okay, there's no need to include that in the dialogue. Okay, you're just insulting the intelligence of your audience. This is probably my number one complaint with this. Well, there's this and one other thing that I'll touch on after this, but this is probably my number one complaint was the camera work. I know most viewers don't care. You guys probably don't even notice this sort of thing, but it's something that I pay attention to when I'm watching. Nearly I would say at least the first 30 minutes of this episode was shot almost entirely in handheld shaky cam. There are scenes that just didn't need it. The original purpose for handheld back in the day, I mean, I'm not saying that old films like in the 80s and 90s didn't use it, but it was used sparingly, and there were specific circumstances that warranted handheld shaky cam, certain shots. Like if you're in the middle of an action sequence where you're trying to amp up the action, it's acceptable. But in this case, we've got like dialogue scenes between two characters where they're just like sitting and talking to one another. This is not an action sequence. This is just a quiet exchange of dialogue between two characters. To be honest, the reason why it frustrates me so much is because it tells me that you have no confidence in the action scene that you're writing, that you know that the action, that the script itself can't produce the action, so you're having to rely on the camera to produce action. That, to me, that's just a cheap cop out, and it bothers me so much. Okay, the other problem that I had pretty much throughout this entire episode was the pacing. And this is another thing that just baffles me, because this is a two-parter. This was a full hour, and so it wasn't like it was a 45-minute episode. It was a full 60-minute episode, and we've still got one other part to deal with. But for me, watching it, it seems like from the very beginning, even during those opening scenes when they were rehashing what the companions were doing, which I'll get into in a minute. I've got problems with that too. This pacing was just breakneck speed the whole time. The only time that things really ever slowed down briefly, there were two scenes. It was the interview with Yaz and Ryan in Barton's office, and then there was the short scene there where Graham was talking, when they were talking about the Doctor's origins. Everything else was handheld shaky cam, breakneck speed, rapid jump cutting, even when it was not needed. Everything in this story, in this episode, was just moving so fast that it's one of those things where you're struggling to keep up with what's happening. The plot itself is never given time to breathe. It's never given any room to breathe. It's just like we're moving on from one thing to the next, just nonstop. Doctor Who is not an action sci-fi series. It's so hard to absorb everything that's happening, because everything is happening so fast that it makes it unenjoyable. And if I don't enjoy it, I don't want to watch it again. Why are all the companions back home? Compare this to what was the final story of Tom Baker's first season, Revenge of the Cybermen? Okay, that story was set in the future. Okay, then the next story, the first story of the following season, was Terror of the Zygons, which was also set on present-day Earth. When we start Terror of the Zygons, we don't have to go through this whole rigmarole of finding out what Sarah Jane's been up to in the meanwhile and what Harry Sullivan's been up to in the meanwhile. It's not like Sarah Jane and Harry Sullivan were brought back to Earth after the events of Revenge of the Cybermen, and then they've just been piddling around on Earth for the last 6 to 8 months and until this Zygon thing happens. No, they've been off with the Doctor, going who knows where, and it's just that when the Brigadier calls them back to Earth, that's when they come back. There's no need for the companions to come back home, because, as a friend of mine pointed out, the Doctor can bring them back to Earth 5 minutes, like the first time they left Earth last season. She can bring them back to Earth 5 minutes after that, at any time she wants. The scene where Ryan is playing basketball, they imply that Ryan he keeps having to make up all these excuses for his absence. Why would there be even the concept of absence is irrelevant when we're dealing with time travel. They can go off and have adventures with the Doctor for years, months, years at a time, and then come back 5 minutes after they left. And as far as everyone else is concerned on Earth, they've only been gone 5 minutes. To me, that's another one of those things where they're having to dumb it down to just the absolute bare bones base level, because they're catering to the masses. Your average channel surfer is too effing stupid to work out these nuances of time travel. All you needed was you could have had a short scene inside the TARDIS room, in the console room, where all four characters are in there. They get called back to Earth by MI6. They materialize on Earth. Bam, they're back on Earth. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have it immediately follow up after the last story last season, but you could have at least implied that they've been on some adventures during the off season, and this is just where we're picking up. But again, that's like, we got to dumb it down for the masses, and that's too much thinking. Okay, this is like, I'm sounding like a broken record complaining about this, but the sonic screwdriver, oh my gosh, she's using the sonic screwdriver as a flipping tricorder, and it's so flipping annoying. First scene, whenever the creatures are trying to get through the TARDIS doors, She points the sonic screwdriver at it and takes a reading, and then she looks at it. I mean, I don't even know how that works. It's a screwdriver. In the original series, the sonic screwdriver was a tool that the Doctor could use on occasion to kind of get himself out of a pinch. It's kind of become like a convenient plot device. That's what it's been used for in the revival. The TARDIS is jam-packed with sensors and scanners and stuff. Instead of having the Doctor point the sonic screwdriver at the doors and get the readings through the sonic screwdriver, why can't she just walk over to the effing console and do a scan that way? Because that's how it would have been done in the original series, right? I mean, can the TARDIS do anything except just move them from point A to point B? Are you telling me that this piece of technology that comes from Gallifrey, from Time Lords, it can't do anything other than just move them through space and time? It can't scan the interior. It can't scan the exterior. It can't take any kind of readings. She has to rely on the effing sonic screwdriver to do all that. We now need to find an expedient way of getting some expository dialogue to tell the audience what's going on here. So let's just point the sonic screwdriver at the doors, and bam, we'll just have the Doctor relay that information to the audience. You didn't need to use the sonic screwdriver for that. You've got a console in the TARDIS room there that could have done that just as effective. Okay, I already touched on this a minute ago. There was a lot of rapid jump cutting in this. There are certain scenes in this episode, and this was true last season as well, where there's just too many cuts. This was one of my complaints with Jodie Whittaker's performance last season, and I noticed it again in this episode, and it was really only this one scene where it was the most prevalent to me. But it was when she was talking to the alien light creature after they got it trapped in that little glass compartment or whatever it was they had in. After they had it trapped in that glass compartment, and she was talking to it, she keeps shifting her weight from one foot to the other, and I've heard people say in the past that that's a sign of a bad actor when they're shifting their weight when they're giving their lines. And she was bad about doing this last season, and she was doing it again this season too, and this episode. And I'm not going to say that's the sign of a bad actor, but the part of it was the fact that she kept shifting her weight back and forth while she was giving her lines. The other half of it was that the shot was handheld, so the camera is having to sway back and forth to keep her in frame while she's doing that, so it kind of makes you seasick. The incidental music was, to me, a little over the top in this episode, and I want to believe that it's partly because they're trying to do this whole James Bond riff thing, and the other half of it is probably just because it's the premiere episode and they're trying to hit the ground running with a bang. But the incidental music was just almost nonstop from start to finish in this whole episode, and again, this contributes to the sense that the episode never had a chance to just kind of. There was no space for it to breathe. It just was going nonstop the whole time. Okay, this is another thing that maybe I'm just reading too deep into this, but whenever the aliens or whatever make Yaz disappear and she gets transported to this other dimension or whatever it was, where like all these weird looking trees were or whatever, I could not help but get Stranger Things vibes from that. Okay, it to me it seemed like a straight rip from like the whole upside down thing from Stranger Things. And of course at the cliffhanger ending, the Doctor gets transported there as well. I don't know what that place is supposed to be yet. Hopefully we'll find out in part 2. But this alien creature making you vanish like that, and then you end up in this other dimension or whatever. I mean, I'm not gonna say that that's never been done before, but the fact that it's on the heels of this whole Stranger Things craze is I wouldn't have gone that route if I were Chibnall, because I know I cannot be the only one who saw that comparison. Okay, this is really the only other complaint that I had. Whenever the birthday sequence starts at Barton's house or whatever, the whole James Bond style music. I mean, come on, like when you start doing that, okay, the car chase scene on the motorcycles also was just a bit ridiculous to me. When you step over the line and like that, okay, it stops being a it stops being an episode of Doctor Who that is loosely based on James Bond. It becomes a parody of James Bond. Okay, I don't understand this obsession with the revival of Doctor Who with parodying other works. It's okay to take cues from a James Bond style story, like the spies and everything, but you have to think outside the box enough to make the story its own, so that it has its own identity, so that it's not just, as I say, so that it doesn't come off as a parody of a James Bond film. Okay, the last thing I'll touch on, spoiler alert if you haven't already seen this episode, or if you have no intention of seeing the episode, the Master has regenerated again, apparently. And now we've now gone vice versa. Before, the Doctor was a male, the Master was a female. Now the Doctor is a female, and the Master is a male. I like this character's portrayal of the Master from what little I've seen of it so far. In that regard, I'm looking forward to seeing where this is going in the next episode, where this is going with the Master. If I had to rate this episode on a scale of 1 to 10, I don't know, a 5 maybe. I mean, I won't say it's the worst episode of Doctor Who that I've seen of the revival, but it's light years from being any. I wouldn't even put it up there with It Takes You Away from last season. It's not an episode that I would see myself watching again. I will not guarantee that I will do a review video of every episode. I will do my best to try to do one after the second half, the second part, to kind of give a follow up. But since we're going into a new year, we're going into a new season, I wanted to give my initial thoughts on the first episode. If you like this video, like and subscribe. I'll try to post videos as often as I can. Thanks for watching.